All right. So I think we're live, you guys. Welcome, everyone. This is our first Facebook live stream conversation for a new series that we're doing at Care Washington. It's called Our Path Forward, and we're going to be having weekly conversations on Thursdays at 3 p.m. And I just want to read a brief description about what the show is about and the kind of topics we're going to be discussing on this show. So Our Path Forward is it's a show where we're going to sit around and talk about kind of everything that's on the top of people's minds. And what we were thinking about is that it's been a really crazy 4 years and an even crazier 2020. We're coming out of what is arguably the most overtly racist administration in this nation's history. And we're also going into our second year now of surviving this pandemic. So we feel like this is really a moment in our nation's time to step back, and it's really a moment like we've never seen before. And we're all kind of asking, what does the path forward look like now? So to answer that question, or to at least ponder it, the team at Care Washington is going to be holding weekly conversations, as I said, on Facebook Live, where we can think out loud together with you all on topics like the continuing threat of white supremacy, getting the COVID vaccine and getting, quote, back to normal, whatever that looks like, and how we can continue to push our community's issues to the forefront now that Trump is gone. So this week, for our very first show, we're going to be talking about the launch of Care Washington's Our Path Forward series. And we're also going to be talking about how that applies to Care Washington as an organization and how we're really evolving into a statewide organization. So today, I'm excited to be joined by Imran Siddiqui, our sort of new, been here a while now actually, executive director, came to us from Care Arizona, and also Aiden Anwar. She is our outreach coordinator, and I'm very excited to have them both on the show today.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, great. So, this is also an opportunity for people watching this to kind of get to know the team at Care Washington a bit more. We've talked a lot about internally. We've talked a lot about how we do all this work, and do people really know who we are? Like, there's real people working at this organization. I've been at Care Washington now for 3 years, and I just got back from 4 months off of maternity leave. And some people know me, and it's been hard with COVID because we've all been like not actually in the community. It's been difficult. So this is also an opportunity for us to get to know people better and like give an opportunity for people to get to know us. So with that in mind, the first question I kind of want to punt to you both is, what has the last 4 years meant to you, and where are you at this moment in time? And I think we'll start with Imran and then kick it to Aiden.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess, for helping put this together. So excited to create a new space where we're going to be able to have these conversations. And, like in this time of Zoom, there's all these different panels and different sort of presentations and things like that we've become accustomed to. But sometimes we need to think out loud as just people, as human beings, like have a space to discuss some deeper issues that we're facing, where it's not just like a straight up informational dump. So really glad that we could put something like this together, and hopefully, let's see where it evolves. But the question for me is like, what has the last 4 years meant to me? And where am I at this moment in time? It's been a challenging past 4 years. I mean, very revealing. I've obviously come here from a state like Arizona, where Trumpism was very much in your face. It was an evolving state where there was a lot of changes happening politically and a lot of polarization, but it was very overt, being an open carry state where people were proudly, brandishing guns during a time when anti-Muslim hatred and anti-immigrant hatred was peaking. Obviously, like if we look at just this, past 48 hours, we've had a tragedy that took place in my home state of Georgia, my hometown of Atlanta and beyond, with eight individuals being killed, women, and mostly Asian Americans being targeted for their identity. And so I just want to give a quick, shout out to our AAPI brothers and sisters who are hurting during this time. We're hurting as well. I mean, our community encompasses the AAPI community as well, but we live in a historical precedent where these types of things happened in our country's history, where this combination of rhetoric and hatred, it starts having an impact on a ground level. And then on the ground level, our communities actually experience that violence up front and up close. And so, Muslim Americans saw this in the aftermath of the Chapel Hill massacre, or like Quebec City, and people are questioning your identity, like, was this really a hate crime? Was this a hate incident? This just seemed to be something else. And so a lot of what we're seeing happening right now is very, it's traumatic for the Asian American community to see like their identity sort of being trivialized, where people are being killed and they're being harassed on a daily basis. And it's really troubling to see that happen. So I just wanted to let you all know that we stand with you, and whatever we can do to help stand together at this time, we're going to do. But yeah, I mean, this all ties together with what we're doing during this time. This is a new administration, obviously, but as you can see very well, like the hate that we were experiencing during that previous administration has not gone away. And so that is a question that we have to contend with as people who've been fighting hate on in a time that precludes Trump. This is not something that was new. Sometimes it was just in your face, but now that the administration is gone and the violence is still there, what are we going to do to stand up? And, if it's not our communities that are being targeted, it's going to be somebody else. And how are we going to respond to that hatred? So these are all things that are just coming to my mind. I think, we're obviously we're energized and we're in a good position as an organization to really take on these tasks moving forward, but we can't rest on our laurels during this time. So I'll let Aiden jump in here and answer that question as well.
So for me, the last 4 years has been interesting. I think Imran touched a lot about on the theme of hate and how, we as a Muslim community have been dealing with the repercussions of that and what that may look like. So I'm an Uyghur American, and I have family back home in Chinese occupied East Turkestan, where currently a genocide is taking place. And these past 4 years have been that these years where the genocide has actually fully come to the place it's been now, with the largest concentration camp system in place since the Holocaust. These where, essentially we have millions of our people in what China calls re-education camps, political indoctrination camps. They're essentially meant to try to make the Uyghur and other Turkic people, quote unquote, normal under the guise of the global war on terror, claiming that these people are potential terrorists, extremists. And so I know me and my family and people in our Uyghur community here abroad have been facing a lot of challenges, pain, trauma. Been going through that. We are still going through that. Unfortunately, the genocide is not over. It's still ongoing, and it's a very, very slow. We're seeing a very slow response from the world. So it's interesting that the question of what has the past 4 years meant to you. I know a lot of people off the top of their head may think of the Trump administration, but for some people, we think something else, some other tragedy happening around the world. And so for me and my family, and for a lot of community members that I know, a lot of this genocide has been wrapped around our head. But it's interesting because this genocide is not disconnected from the rest of the world. It's very much connected. The causes of it is very much connected to, the global war on terror that was launched by the U.S. And the policies and we're starting to see a lot of things. We saw a lot of things here in the States that have reflected surveillance and measures to really corner the Muslim community. And honestly, the genocide happening to the people of East Turkestan is probably one of the most sinister manifestations of a lot of these policies. And so, the stuff that we see taking place here in the States does deeply affect us as well, because we can see what that looks like on a much larger scale if that were to happen. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but we can see little effects of the quote unquote global war on terror and how it is affecting literally Muslims on every face of this earth. So beyond that though, we've obviously been facing this pandemic, and it's been an interesting year, so to say, but facing a lot of challenges, death, loss, this whole Zoom fatigue thing with work, but also just like assessing our blessings of the community, in our community, at least with myself, just even being able to work from home, just realizing how much of a blessing that is. Some people don't even have the internet. They don't have a proper room or a proper space to even connect with their coworkers, or to even go out and get on a Zoom call, or to be able to study for an exam. So just being able to assess that and put things into perspective. Like, I have relatives in concentration camps right now. It's so eerie to have to say that, but I'm here and I'm able to do what I can and continue advocating for our communities.
Thank you both for sharing that, and thank you, Aiden. We're going to talk with Imran a bit, but then I want to get back with you and talk more about what you're talking about, your background and the work that you've done, specifically advocating for human rights and for the people and what's happening in East Turkestan. So Imran, so I mentioned in the beginning that you've been with us. I think you came to us in August, so it's been a while. I guess I was on maternity leave. October. Okay, close. And that you moved up here with your wife, your 3 kids, 3 boys.
Yes.
You got an 18-wheeler and drove the whole family up here from Arizona. And so, your path forward recently led you across the country into a city where I don't think you really know anyone. You're new to the area. What has that been like for you, moving to a new area with your family, becoming the executive director of Care Washington, and doing this all during a pandemic when we're all in our homes and we're all kind of isolated from each other? Like, what has that whole journey been like?
Yeah, I mean, when this pandemic started, I didn't think that I would be making major life moves in the midst of all of this, but it's just, God is the best of planners, is what we say. It's just things sort of lined up in a certain way where this opportunity came up, and I was definitely happy. Like, a little bit about my background. I come from a business background. I have my MBA. I've worked in a corporate setting, and I've owned my own businesses. I had a coffee shop back in Phoenix as well. And so have sort of this.
Where you been, right?
Yeah, where you been?
Where you been?
Yeah. So if you're ever in Phoenix, stop by and grab yourself a Cubano or a espresso or something. But I left a business behind. Family took over that. I had a new house that we had built, so sold the house. So like a lot of upheaval has taken place during this pandemic, and thankfully having a supportive family is really key to that. I think with me, it wouldn't have made sense for me to move to anywhere else. I wasn't looking to go anywhere else. All my family's out in Phoenix now, and we had like a good setup. But when you see like opportunities for growth as an individual and personally, like that's what I'm all about. I've always been dedicated to this work, even prior to me working full-time within this sector. I was always somebody who wrote about Islamophobia and like the American Muslim experience in my spare time. And so that's sort of always been my passion, regardless if I was in the business or corporate world. I was always like somebody who wanted to be helping my community and moving us forward. So so this opportunity came up, and like I saw the Care Washington history. I mean, I've been alongside people like Arsalan and Masi previously, like when we would meet up in places like Washington, D.C. And I always respected the great work that this chapter did. So it was, whether it was like just the media accountability aspect of it, and just like, just being on the forefront of everything over here, like being really innovative and, being, diverse and all of that. So I think just the way that the opportunity presented itself, it made a lot of sense for me and my family just to take this opportunity. And it's been tough during a pandemic, because usually you would go out and you would meet, people at the mosques or like at, Friday prayers and in different places, but can't really do that. You have to do it during Zoom calls, and everybody's on Zoom calls all day with their jobs. So it's been a little bit of a challenge to do that. But so far the community's been super supportive. Like the allied organizations that we work with have been extremely supportive as well. So, and of course the staff, like, I mean, we have, for those of you who don't know, like the staff at Care Washington is amazing. Like I wouldn't trade the staff for anyone else in the world. So it's you should really be proud of the chapter that you have over here. But yeah, I mean, that's really made my transition a lot smoother, and just trying to be experience the outdoors. It's a beautiful place that we live, and so just getting out there, embracing the the mountains and the water and all of that. So doing as much as we can, and it's just building a new chapter in life. So excited from that standpoint.
There's this thing, I'm sure you've heard of it, called the Seattle freeze. But right now, like, you can't really gauge that because we're literally like isolated in our homes and like not socializing. So
the world is freezing out.
Everyone's on the Seattle freeze right now. Like, that's everywhere. And for those who don't know, watching, there are 9 of us now.
Yeah, 9.
This team, which is very exciting. So, well, cool. Well, we are happy to have you, Imran, and it's been great so far. I've been back a month. Yeah. So, can you talked a little bit about this, but can you talk more about what the path forward means to you as an executive director of this organization, and how it's informing the work that we're doing at Care Washington and the work that we want to be doing in our vision kind of moving forward?
Yeah, there's so many facets of what we're dealing with, like as a society, as an organization. You have a massive change even internally within the organization. Like if you really look back, you're probably one of the 2 longest tenured people within the organization. Most of our staff has come here within the last 24 months. So the organization is continually evolving around us. And so having a new executive director is like, how exactly are we going to approach that path forward? Like the needs of the Muslim community and just all marginalized communities have evolved just even in the last 18 to 24 months, as Care Washington continues to change. So really thinking about that, like we're having a lot more internal conversations as a Muslim community as to like things that we need to address internally, like whether it's racism, like lack of diversity within these organizations and so on and so forth. So like, I mean, these are all things that we need to, as an organization, like really contend with. And like for us, part of it is yes, becoming more representative of the broader communities that are out there in the state of Washington. That's number one. Like, are we staying relevant as an organization for the younger generation? We have this new generation of young activists coming up, young professionals that are coming up, and like, is Care Washington relevant for what they see or what they want in a civil rights and advocacy organization? And so continuing to maintain that pipeline of thought leaders, talent, creating opportunities for younger people. Like we have Najma and Aiden, who are working on like our youth advisory council, and like our, like hopefully creating like new pipelines within the organization. And like, hopefully I'll create internships and new jobs down the future. But it's also now if we zoom out even from the organization, like what are we doing on a societal and activism level? Like I mentioned earlier, like we can't be too bogged down. Like a lot of people, even in the aftermath of this election, they're like, okay, now we can sort of sit back and relax, or go to brunch now or whatever it may be. But we can't really do that. Like you see what happened 2 days ago. It's the manifestations of that violent hate are still out there in front of you. There's going to be different angles of Islamophobia, the global war on terrorism, groups being targeted by ICE and different governmental agencies just based off of a different administration. So it can come at you at any angle. So we can't just sit back and say, okay, this XYZ won the election on a state, local, or federal level, and so now we're good. We're never going to be good. Like if you look at the history of Black people in this country, like being enslaved, Jim Crow, like there's been a linear history of oppression and state violence that's taken place against Black Americans. And so that is like 30% of the population where that's taking place. And now you have, so you can't think that, Islamophobia or like any of these other phobias or isms are going to just back off. They're just going to manifest themselves in different ways. And as an advocacy organization, we really have to be proactive and think about, okay, what alliances do we need to make? How do we empower our community, get out there on like different levels to be proactive in the work that we're doing? So these are just some of the thoughts that we have. So I'd like to hear what you all think, though.
Yeah, I think that was a big reason like we wanted to do this show, right? Is because the last 4 years have been so intense and so many other adjectives, and then 2020 was just been crazy. But when Trump came into power, there was like this resistance that formed, and like people really got together. And I remember like I went to like 3 protests in like 4 months, which was a lot for me when he first got elected. And Trump was so overtly racist, misogynist, so many things. And every day I was thinking today, Trump was the news. It's weird to get up now and I go on social media and I'm like, oh, the White House is doing some press briefing on COVID. I should probably watch that. But, when it was Trump, it was, and I don't want to make this all about him, but you would get up in the morning and it's like, oh God, what did he tweet? And there was just so much. It was like, he was just constantly firing, and our positioning was one more of like, we were constantly trying to like react to the horrible stuff he was doing or saying. And so now there's kind of this pause and we have a new administration, and it's like, but these issues still exist, like you're pointing out, like these are systemic issues that are baked into the foundations of our country, unfortunately. And so that's part of the reason it's something I've been thinking a lot about. I know you all have been thinking a lot about, and I think it's in a lot of people's minds, like, what does it look like now not to have to be so reactive, and how can we make sure that we're vigilant and that we're not falling asleep as some people did like during the Obama administration or that sort of thing. I would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think it's important to like note that obviously, and we've mentioned this before, but like the past 4 years, as much as it was marked by the Trump administration and the overt hate that he, would bring forth towards the whole nation and just the whole world in general, there are still a lot of things that we as an organization and as individual Americans, Muslims, whoever you may be, are going to be tackling within whatever the government ends up doing, the policies that we see around us, the effects of certain thoughts and processes. So it's not like, Trump is gone, everything's gone. Like it's not, we just want to like emphasize, we don't promote that idea, nor was it that like before Trump came into office with the Obama administration, everything was good too. Muslims were still being bombed and oppressed. And, I don't think people really talk about that as much. So really like CARE Washington or CARE or any civil rights organization should keep that in mind people should just keep that in mind when they're thinking about the work of our organizations. As much as it may seem like we're not it might seem a little less urgent, or from an overt point of view, there's still, I think, a lot of work that is being done. And then people don't realize that, even with the Biden administration, there's still a lot of work and a lot of advocacy that we have to be doing in order to continue advocating for our marginalized communities and the Muslim community in particular.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. On that note, and then last question for Imran, and then we'll talk to Aiden more. We mentioned that part of our path forward as an organization is really trying to evolve into a truly statewide organization, which is challenging for a lot of reasons, but population is concentrated over here. We're in Seattle, Western Washington, and we want to make sure that we're really connecting to and representing all of Washington state, and there are Muslims in different communities all across our state. So, part of the reason we brought Aiden on as a outreach coordinator, she's in Central Washington in Yakima. Imran, can you talk a little bit about that and what that means for Care Washington to really be a statewide organization?
Yeah, I think part of the benefits of me coming in as an outsider is that I could sort of give a little bit of a fresh perspective or an outsider perspective in terms of how things are going over here, like maybe some historical, like it's something that's a natural, human behavior is like you're going to sort of tilt in a certain direction in terms of like your programming or like how your organization evolves or like where your regional focus is, being in a big metro area like Seattle and like it's really like a bubble in terms of its own politics. And so yes, we have a very broad and diverse community here in Seattle and King County, but also there's different needs in the state beyond just these communities. And Aiden can speak very well to this, like being in Yakima during this time. She was telling us about going to a coffee shop where people are not like, wearing masks, in the middle of pandemic. Not everybody has been even vaccinated yet. We're still like, maybe like in low double digits or something like that. And so the way that things are shaking out for Muslim communities and minority communities in different parts of the state is also a concern for us. I've talked to, during our MDAC, Muslim Days at the Capitol a few months back, we were able to meet up with many people from whether it's the Spokane communities, whether it's Olympia, whether it's Vancouver and some of these other Bellingham and other places. They have real challenges in each of these communities. East of the Cascades is going to be a little bit more different than it's going to be on the west side. What it's like to go out as a visible Muslim in these types of communities is going to be much more of a struggle. What it's like to be a refugee in these communities is going to be much more of a struggle. And so understanding the voices and the needs, how you're going to approach allied or coalition work in these types of regional areas is going to be super unique. And our people over there need to make those connections as well and to still be advocating for themselves, out there and like, speaking up for those rights. And if you feel like you're empowered and you have an organization that is that has your back, like Care Washington, then you can go out there, be empowered, and know that you have a team of people that are going to go out there and be advocating for you on a day-to-day basis. So that's one of the things that's in our strategic plan, just to give you a little bit of a peek in. We want to create opportunities for, whether it's interns coming up or employees, like we're hiring organizers in places like Spokane and some of these cities beyond. Aiden's doing a great job, even though she's in the middle of a pandemic out there in Yakima, and she's going to continue to do a great job over there. But really broadening our focus and bringing all of the Muslim communities in our state together to build a stronger, united connection. So that's a positive direction that we're going in. Inshallah, we'll get the community support to continue building in that direction.
Yeah, because you've been here now long enough to see, Imran, that, and I think this is the reality in every state. Like there are sometimes radical differences and different cultures within different parts of the state. So Eastern Washington, where I'm from, Spokane area, that's quite different than where we're at here in Seattle. For those who might just be joining us, I wanted to just really quickly say this is Care Washington, of course. This is our first launch of our weekly series, Our Path Forward. And today we're joined by Imran Siddiqui, our executive director, and Aiden Anwar, our outreach coordinator over in Yakima. So I want to talk a bit more to you now, Miss Aiden. Let me pull up my questions here for you. So first, this is kind of a big question, but could you just tell us a bit more about yourself and the work that you've done advocating for human rights, and specifically for the people in East Turkestan?
Yeah, so okay, so where do I start?
It's huge, I know.
I'm gonna try to keep it like short, just because
Okay.
you can go in so many different
We'll
directions.
do more of this too. We'll do more, like we'll talk
Yeah.
about this because there's a lot to talk about with you.
Yeah, so so I graduated college a couple of years ago. And when I started college in 2015, I know it seems like I'm really young, but 2015, this was like before the whole concentration camp system started. I went to college thinking, okay, like just like any other freshman entering, you're like, okay, I'm gonna like try different majors, comp sci, pre-med. You know, I did neuroscience, cultural anthropology, and I already knew there was so much oppression occurring back home. Like my grew up in a very like politically active family where, you know, we would go to demonstrations in front of the Chinese embassy to talk about the oppression taking place, the occupation that China was, you know, carrying out since 1949. So I grew up like knowing about the oppression, and I was actually like my senior year of high school, we had like a mini conference at the library that my dad and I had organized. So already we were kind of in that sphere, but never did I ever think, okay, going into college that a whole concentration camp system would be built. And I think that whole occurrence and the fact that it occurred during my college years really shaped my trajectory for what I was going to end up doing, because I was obviously like, when I was pre-med, I was like taking organic chemistry and I was like, what am I doing with this? Like, I couldn't, there was so much urgency with the genocide that I felt like I couldn't focus on anything else. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to probably end up doing humanities and going into the advocacy world in some way, shape, or form. I thought potentially about law school, but year by year during college, situation just gets significantly worse. Like 2016, you know, this is the year Trump gets elected. And for example, you know, we hear that these camps are being built, and I'm like, what? And we're hearing tens of thousands are being put into these camps. And again, this is before the media even talks about what's happening. And so we're here as the Uyghur community in the diaspora, hearing about this information. We're hearing slowly, we're losing contact with our family members, our aunts or uncles, my cousins, my friends not being able to talk to their moms or their dads back home, because I had friends who were studying abroad. And slowly you start to hear not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands in these camps. And then we're starting to hear the programs where the Chinese government was putting like Han Chinese officials to live inside Uyghur homes, to monitor Uyghur people's religious activity, to assess their political views, you know, being encouraged to sleep in the same bed as the Uyghur women while their husbands are in camps and prisons. We're hearing about people getting sentenced to mass prison sentences for absolutely no reason at all, including like we had my relative of mine who was recently sentenced to 20 years with the charge of trying to separate the Chinese state, which is the excuse that the Chinese government uses for you know, thousands of people to basically insert this and put them into this insidious, sinister incarceration campaign to essentially wipe us out. So you're starting to see these like really, and then I went to Turkey in 2016 as well after my freshman year to kind of interview Uyghur refugees, and I think that was a big turning point in just kind of me assessing like the world and like what I'm doing with my life. But I go there and, you know, I'm talking to political prisoners or former political prisoners who are telling me their time in Chinese prison. And, I talked to a mother whose daughter was sentenced to 9 years of prison because she wore the hijab. And she was 19 years old, the same age I was at the time. So like, I had these moments where I was like, and I came back with honestly secondhand trauma because I was not expecting to hear what I did. And really that just kind of shaped the way, like I shaped, I guess, the next decisions that I would be making in the next couple of years of college. I spent the last couple of years of college just doing a lot of advocacy work. Honestly, I put my classes not as a primary, not as the main priority, which is, I don't know if my parents would be watching this, but I'm sorry. Like, I did not put my classes first. I did my classes to the bare minimum, did what I could, but I was mainly focusing on like how to cope with this whole thing, because it was just even dealing with the healing process of that secondhand trauma. And I'm saying secondhand, I can't even imagine the firsthand trauma that a lot of people that I know have faced. But so that whole experience really shaped the next few years. And then right after college, I ended up working for a human rights organization. It's called Justice for All, based in Chicago. And they had a whole campaign on advocating for the Uyghur people. And I was really lucky to have been able to kind of like go from doing this advocacy work on a more volunteer basis to then doing it as a full-time, paid basis. So I was really lucky for that. But then honestly, with time, it did get very, very, very draining, as with any activism or any advocacy work that one ends up doing. But I don't think anybody is really wired to speak on genocide, torture, continuously doing advocacy work, dealing with genocide deniers on a day-to-day basis. I don't think we're really designed for that job in a healthy manner if you don't have really mechanisms to keep you in place. So honestly, I did really struggle with this burnout. I think the East Turkestan issue, and for those who don't know much, I would encourage you all to please look it up. There's tons of articles and reports out there to describe what's happening, but just even reading through an article can be just distressing enough for one person who is being just exposed to it. So you can kind of imagine the types of feelings that a lot of us Uyghur community members who have been doing this work for a few years have been feeling nowadays. But so yeah, that's kind of like a big sum up of like my trajectory in that field. And I'm still continuing it. Like right after this, I actually have a webinar with a college to talk about the situation. So, I'm continuing some advocacy on the side, but that's kind of like a gist of, I guess, the past several years in that regard.
Thank you, Aiden. I appreciate you sharing all that. My husband is getting diapers for her screaming baby.
The realest talk show on Facebook Live, y'all.
Oh, I gotta be inside.
Yeah, and again, I was gonna say, good job, Robel. We'll post an article in the comments of this video that we find as just a good overview of, or maybe that one that was the visual narrative that highlighted the three different guys' stories. We'll post that in the comments about what's happening in East Turkestan, so that for those who don't know or just want to know more can know about that. Also, if anyone watching has any questions, please comment with your questions. We're going to get them copy pasted into our Zoom chat so we can hopefully answer those questions live. And if you have any questions after this is posted, it's not live, we will answer them during next week's episode. So we really want to hear what you all think about what we're talking about, the current climate, current topics. If you have any questions for our team, basically anything you want to say that's appropriate. And we will try to answer your questions. So my next question for Aiden is, can you talk about what brought you to CARE Washington and about the work you're doing as outreach coordinator in Central Washington and helping us grow into a statewide organization, more of a statewide organization?
I think the answer to that kind of connects back to what I was just talking about, the burnout of doing the work every day on the East Turkestan genocide was too overwhelming, to the point where I was like, this is not good for my health, and I don't think that continuing, I don't think nobody should do work that is going to cause mental and physical harm to yourself. And so I made the decision to stop doing the full-time work with the organization that I was working with. And once I quit, I was like, okay, now what? And that's when I actually reassessed kind of like what I had been doing since college, and just like what I had been doing during college as well. And I was like, you know, I've been very single focused on this one issue. And I feel like as somebody who also grew up in the States, right, as a Muslim, as a visibly Muslim, as a visible Muslim woman, for example, there are a lot of issues here in the States too that need to be dealt with. And I wanted to take a lot of the advocacy skills that I learned through the human rights world and kind of bring them into the civil rights world and see, and also just get my, kind of get myself into the sphere of American Muslim civil rights, or the kind of issues that we're facing here, because I was also like, a lot of the stuff we're facing here is not, again, like it's not disconnected from what we're seeing abroad. So that's when I was like, okay, it's time for me to try to switch up my avenues and do something slightly different, but also similar in the sense that I'm still taking a lot of the skills that I've learned in the advocacy world and kind of pinpointing it in a different direction. So I was lucky and I just moved here to Washington this past summer. So I was like, okay, I know CARE has been like a really prominent organization over the past couple of decades. And I heard really good things about CARE Washington. So I was like, you know what, let's see how this goes. And I would love to see how, this work that the skills I had developed over the past few years can now be applied to a different mission in a way, but a different, but yet similar mission, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what brought me here. And I'm here working as the outreach coordinator. I guess my location here in Yakima is ideal in the sense that I'm able to kind of reach out to other parts of Washington. And by the way, I'm here in Yakima not because I was born and raised here, or, this is my hometown. It's because my husband goes to medical school here. So it just happens to be that I'm here as well. But the important, like Imran mentioned though, the Muslim community here do have different needs, or there's a lot more emphasis on, for example, the types of experiences that we as Muslims here might face, being in a super red town. Like Imran mentioned, like I went to a coffee shop a few weeks ago and nobody, including the workers, were wearing masks, and they're very arrogant and strutty about it, saying like, no, we're not going to do it. I had a friend who had a very scary incident happened to her at Walmart, and she wore hijab, and some white guy kind of came up from behind her and said effing Muslim to her ear. And from there, and since then, she hasn't been able to even go to the grocery store herself, and she does the curbside pickup now, which is probably good for COVID as well. But and so yeah, like I've been getting to know Muslims here, trying to see, it's definitely not as large as the Muslim community in Kane County, but again, that speaks to a lot of work that should be done here as well, in terms of increasing our network or connections, figuring out what exactly Muslims here in Eastern and Central Washington need. Because, and I know like Spokane, for example, has a very high refugee immigrant population. So my next goal is to try to like get more information and get connected with them, see what we as an organization can do to uplift their needs as well. So yeah, it's been a gradual process. Obviously, as when you move to a new place, it takes some time to get to know people. And with COVID, it's a lot harder, because everything is so virtual nowadays. But yeah, that's been my role so far, and I've been really enjoying it, and enjoying the new team that I've joined here this past January, and yeah, and feeling passionate about speaking for causes and uplifting the voices of people who need to be heard in the community.
Thank you, Aiden. As you were talking, I was thinking we should have Zara Roach on the show. She's on the city council in Pasco, which is one of the Tri-Cities in Eastern Washington. And she's participated in our Muslim Day at the Capitol in the past. And she's just a really awesome person, but it'd be great to have her on to talk about how it's go. I haven't talked to her really much since she got elected. And, she's one of the first to Muslim women. Her and Varisha Khan are the first two Muslim women in Washington State that we know of to hold office. So it'd be great to have her on and talk about how it's going over in the Tri-City area. Oh, you kind of talked about this, Aiden, but last question before we go. I know we said we were going to be 20 to 30 minutes on Facebook Live, but we can go as long as we want. It's Facebook Live. So I did think you were from Yakima. When I first heard about you, I was so excited. I was like, oh, I'm from Eastern Washington, North Idaho, someone else who is like from like more, you know, smaller town, rural, whatever. And then I found out you're from like DC metro area, Virginia, big city girl. So what is the biggest difference between where you came from and where you are now?
Yeah, well, so I hail from Northern Virginia, which for those who know is a very, very diverse area. It's crowded, a lot of traffic. I went to school with like other hijabi girls, even in elementary school. And there was, I was very, very lucky to not have to ever face forms of discrimination, racist remarks, Islamophobic remarks in school, which was something that I know a lot of people don't experience. So I was really blessed to be in that kind of environment. And then I went to school in North Carolina. So I went to college in North Carolina. So that was like also another dimension, but that was also really like, it never posed an issue for me in terms of like diversity or just being in a super homogenous white town. So moving here, it's definitely been interesting, even just a landscape itself. Like you go out, there's like dry mountains and then like cows. And then there's like a few shops. The closest grocery store to me is Walmart, which is fine, but it does get very, very crowded. There's not many food options here. If you want to go eat out at like a nice restaurant. So I mean, like certain dimensions that I've like gotten used to. And I think it's been a blessing that it's been COVID, because I've kind of like domesticated myself anyways, because I was like, I'm just gonna make my home like comfort zone, you know. But you can definitely sense the more the more redness of the state in a way, just even like going to a public place and seeing people not wanting to take masks seriously. Or right here, I'm just looking at a private Christian school next to me, and they've been open for the longest time. Ever since I've been here, I just know they've been open. Like they've been dropping their kids off to school. So clearly they have been operating as if a pandemic has not been taking place. And I can see parents picking up their kids right now. So it's been an interesting landscape change. Definitely in the beginning, I was uncomfortable when I would go to the store and I would notice stairs, but I honestly I've gotten like, I feel like I've become like immune to it. Like I don't even notice it anymore. I feel like my husband would probably notice it more than I would. But I think that's also just a result of me like growing up with hijab and just kind of being used to it. But at the same time, I do feel like I have to be a lot more careful here. After hearing a couple incidents that have taken place to a couple of friends. So like I try not to go to the grocery store alone, for example, which is something I would never ever think about or worry about in Virginia. And also just like the Muslim community here is also very small. There's only one mosque. Unfortunately, obviously with COVID, there can only be so much taking place there. But you know, the Jummah, the Friday prayer is very small. I've yet to meet like girls my age who are at the mosque, engaging with them. So it definitely has been a slower process in getting adjusted. But yeah, I'm taking the time to just kind of, get used to it. I'm like, I realize there are Muslims here who've been living here for 20 years, like 20 plus years, which I'm very shocked about, but it is very much a thing. So I'm like, if they can be here for 20 years, I can be here for a few years. But yeah, that's been my take on it.
I actually really like the dry country. I miss it, like that dry landscape over there. It's too bad over here for me.
But I also love it because there's no cars when you go to the store, no traffic whatsoever. You'll get there in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas I go to Seattle and I immediately start stressing out because there's cars everywhere, and traffic, and I actually do. And then I realize how much I hate the crowded city. So I actually do appreciate the open landscape.
Open spaces. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap it up, I'm going to introduce next week's show and what we're going to talk about, but any final thoughts or comments from Imran or Aiden?
No, I mean, this was a good conversation. Yeah, thanks once again, Jess, for facilitating it. I think we just want an opportunity. I know it's difficult during this time for the community. Like a lot of times we would be having these events and coming to your different areas and massages and so on and so forth. So we want you to know us at a deeper level and understand, like, you know, we all come from like these unique backgrounds, and we have like a truly like, you know, brilliant, diverse staff as well. So we want to, you know, highlight that as much as possible. So glad that we could have this conversation. Inshallah, we'll have some more coming up next week.
We're real people here, Caraway. There's real people behind the scenes working. Yeah, so next week we are planning on talking about access to the COVID vaccine, some of these, you know, barriers that have existed but are now also being barriers to getting the COVID vaccine, and disparities in access to the healthcare system in general. We're going to be joined by Nejma Osman, who is our legal and policy coordinator, and she's been doing some work around health issues and the COVID vaccine. So we're really looking forward to that conversation with her. We want to, at the end of every episode, we want to pose a question to you all. And we're also going to post it in the comments, so you can reply in the comments, you can DM us, you can email us, however you want to reach us. So our question for next week's episode is, are you planning on getting the COVID vaccine? And what are you most looking forward to doing once things return to the new normal, whatever that looks like? So let us know your thoughts. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Aiden and Imran, for taking time out of your busy schedules. We all live on Zoom nowadays, so I'll see you guys on Zoom soon.
All right.
Thank you, Jess.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
See you later. Bye-bye.